Hello everyone, my name is Alice and I'm from Walnut Valley Robotics. Today, my fellow members Ivan and Harris have created a really cool iPhone charger CAD project, and Harris is going to show you how to create your own.
To get started, log into your Onshape account and click on Create. Create a new document and then name it iPhone Charger. For this document, we will be using millimeters, so to change it to millimeters, go to Document menu and click Workspace Units. You have the option of choosing your units, and now select millimeters. Click the check mark and now you can start CADing. Start by clicking the Sketch button. Then select the top plane. By right-clicking, now you can select View Normal to Sketch Plane, and now start with a center point rectangle, as shown. We don't have to constrain it now, so draw one of them first. We can click that dimension tool and dimension it at 13 by 5.5 millimeters. And the first inside rectangle can be drawn now. Constrain the outer rectangles with the inner rectangles at 0.46 millimeters. Do it for all 4 lines. Now the first inside rectangle should be constrained. We can draw second inside rectangle again. Please don't constrain it. Now we can start putting dimensions on it. We would do 0.31 millimeters from the first inside rectangle to the second inside rectangle. Do this for all 4 rectangles. After done, everything should be constrained. Now, we will need to add a few supporting lines to use later on. So draw a set of 2 lines at the midpoints of the rectangles. The next lines would be 0.16 millimeters apart, going horizontally. So we can draw them apart first, then use the dimension tool to constrain. After that, we can exit the sketch and extrude. Click on the Extrude button, then select all of the sketches. Now, we select the opposite direction and we enter 13 millimeters. We can start on the second extrude by making sure our sketch is still shown, clicking the eye. We then hit Extrude again and choose these specific parts. Now we can click the check mark. We can now start sketching the holes for the USB by creating a sketch on the top left side and selecting the thinner area. We can now insert 2 rectangles without any constraints to prevent further issues such as over-constraining. We can click on the dimension button to add the constraints with the dimensions of 2.5 and 2 millimeters. The rectangles need to also be constrained with other objects, so enter the dimension here, 5.16 millimeters. Do the same for the other rectangle. Now constraining the other set of parallel lines with a distance of 1.79 millimeters to the outside wall, and the rectangles to each other, 3.5 millimeters apart. Now we can end this sketch. When we finish, we can extrude both by 0.31 millimeters. Clicking the 2 rectangles and the Remove button, then enter 0.31 millimeters. Now finish. After this, we need to create another sketch on the opposite side. We need to repeat this extrude onto the other side, clicking the 2 rectangles and the Remove button, then enter 0.31 millimeters. Now finish. After we have gotten the outside frame almost done, we can start on the inside part of the USB. To start off, let's create another sketch. with the plane being the result of extrude 2. We can now start adding rectangles into our sketch, which this time I'll be selecting a corner rectangle instead. For now, I'll just insert the 4 rectangles without any constraints. We will also draw 2 construction lines by pressing Q or the button. One on each side, which are just like the lines of the inside of the USB. This allows us to see the line better later on. Now we can click the dimension button and actually start the dimensioning and constraints. Our first set of constraints would be the rectangles, which respectively would be in this order: 1 by 6 millimeters, 1 by 5 millimeters, 1 by 5 millimeters, and 1 by 6 millimeters. Our first constraint would be a 5 millimeter dimension for all the rectangles to this line in the video. Now we can add a dimension of 1.5 millimeters to the outside rectangles to the previous construction line. And a 2 millimeter dimension to the other rectangle. By the end, everything should be constrained properly and the lines should be black, not red or blue. We can extrude what we had just made by clicking the extrude button, selecting the 4 shapes and selecting the remove option and entering 0.2. After the extrude is finished, we need to add another set of bumps, and to do this, we would be creating a sketch on this plane inside the hub and then click the View Normal to Sketch Plane to see everything normally. We would again enter another 4 rectangles without the constraints so everything is blue, and then click on the dimensions option and start from left to right with the dimensions of 1 by 6 millimeters, 1 by 5 millimeters, 1 by 5 millimeters, and 1 by 6 millimeters. Now we need to dimension the rectangles to the bottom line with a 5 millimeter distance. Now to constrain the rectangles within each other, we need to have a 1.5 millimeter distance between the inside wall of the USB and a 2 millimeter distance from the first rectangle to second, a 0.46 millimeters from the second to a third, and another 2 millimeters from the distance from the third rectangle to the fourth. To now add the bumps, draw another rectangle, not constrained from anything again. Repeat this for the other 3 rectangles. To start dimensioning again, we click the dimension button and the measurements of the rectangle from left to right are 5.5 millimeters by 0.75 millimeters, 4.5 millimeters by 0.75 millimeters, 4.5 millimeters by 0.75 millimeters, and 5.5 millimeters by 0.75 millimeters. To constrain the rectangle, set in the distance between the outside and inside rectangles to be 0.125 millimeters sideways and a 0.25 millimeter distance on the bottom. Repeat this for all 4 rectangles. Everything should be constrained at this point, so we can now move on to the sketch fillet. Click on the sketch fillet button and then select all the corners of the 4 inside rectangles. After this, click on the dimension and edit it to be 0.375 millimeters. Everything should now look normal and constrained. Now, click on the extrude button and extrude the 4 shapes you had just created. Clicking the opposite direction button and adding a depth of 0.2 millimeters. Click the check mark. Once finished, we can start filleting the bumps by clicking the Fillet button and then selecting all 4 edges of the shapes and setting the radius to be 0.2 millimeters. Click the check mark. To chamfer the edge, click the chamfer tool and select the edge and enter a value of 0.5 millimeters. Lastly, for the entire USB portion, add a fillet to the outside by clicking the Fillet tool and selecting all 4 edges, and then also adding a radius of 0.5 millimeters.
Thanks for finishing the first part of your project. Continue on to the next video to finish the cable and lightning portions.